Oh my goodness. And he told me when he started real estate, he's like, honey, this is going to be really hard, but you're just going to have to trust me. That was the first time. It took me 10 years to really see, like, it can be a good thing to have differences. It was the first thing in my life I felt like I did well. And I heard so clearly in my head, this part of your life is over. He has been a big part of this. I can't imagine doing it without him. So,
hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We're here with such an exciting guest today. We have with us Julie Hedenborg, and she is a former nurse anesthetist. I already practiced this like 3 times, and of course I was going to get it wrong, who is now the creator and host of the Everyday Miracles podcast, where she goes over testimonies that people have had. And also the author of 2 amazing books, which we'll get into in more detail later. And on top of that, she is a mom of 2 and the wife of Lars Hedenborg, which a lot of you guys in our organization know him. He's a powerful real estate coach and entrepreneur. So she has so much to tell us today about her story, about being married to a hard charger. And I am so excited to have you with us here, Julie. Welcome.
thank you, Carla. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you. Well, so we're going to jump right into it. I want to start by talking a little bit about balance, that dirty word. So I wanted to go back when you started out as a nurse and how you balance that with like being a mom and being married, like I said, to a hard charger.
Yes, it's a great place to start. Yeah. I finally found my niche. I loved nursing. Lars and I we met, he was not in real estate. And I think it's interesting to tell this piece because so many people meet Lars and they don't really know the full journey. But when we were dating, he had a corporate job with an aerospace company, Curtis Wright. The Wright brothers were here in North Carolina. And he basically was their business development guy, and he would travel a ton. And so we met when I was 35. We got engaged about a year and a half later, and we wanted to have kids. And so traveling all the time wasn't going to be conducive, so we got married in 2006, and he left his corporate job to venture out in a completely different area into real estate. And this was not a great time to do it. Keep in mind, everyone thought he was out of his mind. The real estate market was getting ready to tank, and people could already see signs of that. He has this cush corporate job where he's climbing the ladder, favor with the bosses, things are looking promising, but he decided to leave it. And everyone thought he was crazy. And, it turns out he worked so hard those first couple of years, and we faced a lot when we first got married because we were rehabbing a house while we were living in it. Now that alone is enough to make you crazy, right?
Yes.
We wanted to start having kids pretty soon after. He had changed careers. I had changed to a whole nother job, whole nother hospital. And I needed to wait a year before I had benefits for maternity. So we waited a few months, but soon after that, I'm, checking. I have a lab in my bathroom, ovulation monitors and all the things. And I have a Master of Science. I'm really into all that. But we had so many things that we faced early in our marriage. His dad had a massive stroke. We were trying to help care for him. It was very heartbreaking. 2 young kids, lots of things happening and going on. But the first year of his real estate career, oh my goodness, he worked just relentlessly. And I remember he would be up at night. He wouldn't come to bed. And I'd come up like, what are you doing on the computer? He's stuffing envelopes and all the things that he now coaches about. He knows what worked and what didn't, but it's all used, for good. But it was a very challenging time. And so it took a couple of years, but he ended up going and starting his own company and doing really well, having great success in a hard market, which is crazy that, and a lot of the people in his corporate job that said he was nuts, unfortunately ended up getting laid off those next couple of years. And so looking back, in hindsight, it's always 2020, right? But things happen. But, there were lots of challenges that we faced being newly married, having struggles with young ones and our older family members and learning just to be married. And I knew Lars was smart, I didn't know just how smart he really was. I think I told you that when we were on a dinner together one night, and very driven. Oh my goodness. And he told me when he started real estate, he's like, honey, this is going to be really hard, but you're just going to have to trust me, in this path. And one of the pictures I know, one of the things that I want people to hear as a tip that will get there, is really booking that quality time when you're in that hardworking time where you're building a business, and it takes a lot of effort and energy. And real estate in the beginning, you feel like you're on call like 24/7. And I tell you what, I didn't know anything about real estate, obviously coming out of healthcare. I have so much respect for real estate professionals because it is tough, and learning that balance. I may see hard things in the hospital, but when I clock out, I'm out. It's just a different thing. But one of the things he loves to show in all of his presentations, I feel so bad about this, is we were struggling with getting that time together being married. And he promised me, we had a mountain trip that we were going on. And he showed this at your last event too. I was so mad at him because there was this doctor and this great big deal that he was working. And this doctor, and he promised me once we get to the mountain, we'll have time together. I'll be off of my BlackBerry. This is how long ago this was. And he promised me that. And he got up there, and sure enough, the doctor's calling. He's got to leave the mountain to get a signal. He's got to leave the mountain and I was so mad at him. And there's the picture. He was trying to get a signal, and he was on his computer, and he's all stressed out. And we're in this beautiful cabin. And out of my spite, I snapped a picture of him working when he promised me that he wouldn't. And I hate that everyone can see that now, but, I had every right to be mad, but it was hard for him and it was hard for me, but we got through it. And that was one of the things that we learned was in terms of the balance, booking out that time that you do set aside. And I think, we did that consistently, and I'm grateful to him because it was harder for him to book that time than it was for me. But, carving out those date nights and communicating clearly and honoring your commitments too. And there are times when I haven't honored my commitments either, Carla. So I'm not trying to make him out to be the bad guy because he really has been, it's been an amazing ride with him. And joining EXP, all the travel, finding balance in terms of being a mom. And, I have a whole different path now. God redirected my whole life. What's that verse? Man makes his plans, but God directs his steps. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, fortunately I'm able to travel with him a lot more now, but, even some of that for me can be a lot, and just being different than he is, I have to just tell him, that's a lot of travel at once for me, and now we've been together 20 years. And so he understands me. It took us 10 years to really figure each other out. But it's a beautiful thing, and I encourage people, if you're married to a man or a woman who is a hard charging, driven person, they're kind of like a unicorn, So, I think it's a beautiful thing to find a partner and maybe discover after you've been married that they're one of these special people, and we're all special. They're not better than other people. They just are unique. And so, my advice to you would be, well, number one, I think for any marriage, always praying for your spouse, I think is so important. And I pray for Lars all the time, provision, wisdom, health, direction, clarity. And that's so important. And I know this applies to every marriage, but also I love that book, The 5 Love Languages.
Me too.
I think that's such a great thing. And Lars and I took that test. Being married to a coach, I've taken every kind of personality test, every kind of development. There have been so many things I've learned. I should really have everything dialed in, but I don't, but that's okay. We're all learning and we're all a work in process. But I think, those would be some of the tips I think for balance, and finding a way to make it work is understanding prayer, your love language, communicating when things are too much for you, or, being a cheerleader. These people that are hard charging and they're leaders. And so often they're in a position where they're encouraging everyone else. They're trying to bring up, and equip other people constantly. It can be draining, I would imagine. I'm not one of those personalities, but I really try and I'm better at this than I was, but I really try to encourage my husband because it's not an easy path. So, just try to really, celebrate your differences, and love on him for that. It's actually a good thing if you're really different than your husband. It can be bad too. But, one of the things that we did, I mentioned the tests, and I think this is a really comical example, but there's something called the Colby, and they actually had an event for couples, married couples. And we went, and again, Lars even would admit this if he were here. It took us 10 years to figure out how to work together being so different. Lars is super driven. One of the things in the Colby test, one of the categories that they test you is something called quick start. And that is Lars. He is, let's do this. They don't get scared of risk. They go a lot by their gut. They're usually really intuitive in a lot of ways. So it's not always bad, but I scored really high in the total opposite, which is fact finder. And I'm like, okay, well, how much is the insurance? Well, I want to know every detail. So too many fact finders in the group can make you kind of get into this perfection paralysis, and it's too much risk aversion, right? But at the conference, I'm actually seeing my score and I'm feeling really insecure, and I'm feeling like this is a bad thing and I'm holding him back. And at the same time, there's a couple at the next table and they both scored super high on quick start. And they're talking about this and they're like, oh yeah, you remember we had this company and that company, and we were like, oh, let's do it. Let's sell everything. Let's go. And they're like, yeah, we had to file bankruptcy. And they're great things they've done too. But like, it helped me see like, oh, it's not necessarily a bad thing that I'm with Lars, and I can say, let's find out more about this, and I can ask the questions and he can have and sometimes we go into things and I'm still like, like trusting him, blind faith, but, it seems everything he touches, it turns to gold for the most part. He's not perfect and I'm not either. But, that was the first time it took me 10 years to really see like, it can be a good thing to have differences. And so I promise you that as amazing as your spouse, woman or male, or other, I don't know, whatever they may have that you sometimes can feel tempted to be envious of, don't be, and understand that you're different. While Lars has all these strengths in certain areas, I'm an empath. He's not. Even recently we're at a horse show and someone had a seizure in the bathroom floor with the door locked, and I was able to get in there and know what to say and how to speak calmly and compassionately. And Lars, that's just we're different people, different skills. And so I think once you realize that and you can celebrate those things, it helps. So those are a couple of the things on my list. I've been talking a lot, so feel free to interrupt.
That's why you're here, to give us all your wisdom. So I love two things particularly about what you said. Number one is how refreshing it is to hear that it took 10 years to figure it out. Some of us just assume that it's going to click right away, that it's going to be easy. Even Lars told you from the beginning, like, this is going to be really hard, and you had to carve out the time. Like, it wasn't a cakewalk. You have to work at it. So I love that. And then I also love that you speak so positively about your husband. You don't hear that all the time nowadays, going both ways. You pray for him, which I recently started doing for Aaron, and not only, praying for him in the sense of like asking for things, but also just being so grateful. Like, thank you so much for sending him to me, because he is what I prayed for. Like, when I was young, I prayed for a partner. So I think both of those things are just so refreshing, Julie. And I think anybody, including me, can learn from that, because I need to carve more time as well. We're all a work in progress, like you said. So that's awesome. But I do want to kind of talk a little bit, because you mentioned how all of a sudden God had other plans for you and your path just completely changed. So how did that come about? Like, how did you go from being a nurse to all of a sudden starting a podcast and like totally changing your life?
Oh my. So try to make this a long story, not so long, but, yeah, going all the way back, having a career was always something that I had a dream of having. I wanted to be independent, Carla. Going back to my childhood, and I'll just touch on a few things here, but my parents got divorced when I was young, and I saw my mom really struggle. She didn't finish high school. She did go back and get her GED, but she didn't really have any way to support herself. And I saw what that was like. I lived that fear of not having enough. There were years when my mom had to make my clothes for me to go to school. That was hard, I just knew growing up, like I'm going to get my education. This is why, this is my path. And that was my ticket. I didn't want to depend on a man or another person. I didn't care if I married a bazillionaire. I want to know that I can support myself no matter what. I didn't want to go through what she went through. And, my path in life is really funny. There were so many things I was never good at, like an athlete. So many things I tried in life. I remember my first basketball team. My first basket, we'd only really covered offense, and I made the basket after practicing so much, but it was for the other team. So I scored. There are so many things. I never made cheerleading. Like I was kind of a dork in school, I just felt like I could never find my jam, I had like one or two like best friends. I was never popular. I was kind of just blended in with everybody. And, I finally found my thing, and it was even a roundabout thing with nursing, but I ended up going into nursing. I loved it. It was the first thing in my life I felt like I did well. I ended up going to graduate school and learning to do nurse anesthesia, which is kind of like an advanced practice. It's like one of the pinnacle positions in nursing. And I worked so hard, Carla. I went to college for like 8 years. I actually have an undergrad degree before that. So usually it doesn't take 8 years, but you got to have ICU experience. It's a whole process, highly trained. And I even got some awards. Like I felt like, okay, I finally found the thing, like, and my little fact finder mind of all the dials and all the control, like it just meshed with my people skills of empathy. Like it just could not be more perfect. And I wasn't this great Christian person. Like I went to church, but I wasn't really, I really hadn't surrendered my life to God. My faith was, I think my true identity in my mind was I'm a nurse anesthetist. I do anesthesia, and I love telling people my job. And I hate to admit that it wasn't like a cocky thing, but it was like this little nerdy girl who like finally found her thing, and I loved it. And I remember even going to see my next patient. Like I would ask God, like, God, help me to have the words to comfort this person. I know I have drugs. Yeah, but just help me. And sometimes I would have time to pray, usually not, honestly. We're really busy in the OR. But suddenly my life took a huge curveball. And, we even have a school here for nurse anesthetists. And I thought, eventually I'll be teaching and I'll cut back my hours. And I had this whole vision for what my life was going to look like. And, there was one day in the OR, it's actually pivotal. I'd never heard God speak to me before. I didn't even know he was talking to me, but, I think it must've been 2014 or so, but I had a wonderful case I was doing. And I remember intubating the patient, and I was really in like a flow state, just perfect case. It wasn't stressful. That's why it's significant, because this came out of the left field. But I remember putting my blade away after I intubated the patient, and I could still see this. I could still see the scene. And I heard so clearly in my head, it was like a thought in my mind. It wasn't audible, but it was right there. And it said, this part of your life is over. And it was like, my stomach just dropped. And I didn't know it was God speaking to me. I was like, I felt sick. And I could still see exactly. It was so clear. It was so profound and clear. I can still see what I was looking at and hear that thought. And it was like certainty, matter of fact, like, I'm just going to let you know, like there was no discussion, and, I was so confused, and I thought about that, sat in my stomach all day. And it was like, did I eat something bad? Like, why would I have this thought? I was so confused, and I had no idea until hindsight. That was God speaking to me. And people hear God in all different ways. And I know it sounds really weird, but this happened to me. So I wasn't the perfect Christian. You're like, okay, Lord, I'm going to turn in my resignation. And, that was the first shoe to drop. And I kept working. I kept brushing it off. I went home and I told Lars, I'm like, I don't understand why I would think that. Why would I think that? And we fought about this. Like, I don't know, and then I don't know how many months later it was, Carla, but, I had an injury to my neck. that there's some controversy around it. I believe it was caused by a neck adjustment. And I hate that because I know lots of people love their chiropractors, but, it is a known risk of the procedure I had, related to a back issue that I was having. And, I had no pain before. But this injury, long and short of it, left me in an ambulance, and I didn't know if I was going to make it home. I had 2 arteries that were dissected, 2 arteries to my brain that were dissected. It's called vertebral artery dissection, which bilateral is common with this type of treatment. Again, I can't prove that. So there is some controversy. I also had an aneurysm at the level that it was a very vigorous adjustment, like 3 levels of my neck cracked at one time when he twisted my neck. And in the ambulance, I was crying out to God, and I was pleading with him. And I just said, Lord, I don't want to die. My kids were 5 and 7. I've got this younger husband who is amazing. I have a good life. And I felt instinctively, our salvation is not based on the work that we do. We don't earn our way to heaven. It's all faith and grace, great. We're saved by faith through grace, right? But it also says in the Bible that God has plans for us. There's a couple places where plans made in advance, Ephesians 2:10, I think, and Jeremiah 29:11, I have plans for your life. And I knew, even though I had this job, it was weird, but part of me, I think I would have felt like, well, this was my role. I somehow knew in that moment, like, I'm not ready. I have more on this earth. And I cried out to him and I said, please, God, let me share you with just one more person. And I meant it with my whole heart and soul. Like, please, anyone. And 3 years later, I had forgotten about that prayer, and I'm at an event with Lars, and I knew God was doing things in my life because so many doors were shutting. Shortly after that happened, I was told I was disabled for my job because of my back, not related to the treatment, just to be clear. And that was devastating for me. Even though I'd had this miracle, I came out of the ICU with no paralysis. I survived, I didn't have permanent damage from the strokes. It's a miracle that I have no deficits. So that was kind of the first miracle in the podcast. But 3 years after that, God did call me to launch a podcast, and there's a whole process to that, but I never even listened to podcasts. I think someone sent me like a Dr. Phil one. And I remember in the beginning, Lars, I would tell people when I started it, like, it's free. And he would be like, honey, stop saying that. But I didn't know. I just didn't know anything about podcasts. So, he called me to do that. And it was a whole process of stepping out. I almost chickened out, even though it was so clear. I actually had a vision. I didn't even know that was a vision, but it was like, I knew that's what God wanted me to do. And I'd never known anything that sure in my whole life. Yet I get home from this conference, this event, and I'm like, oh, and I'm sitting in front of the computer. And it's like, I know nothing, about doing any of this. And Lars had a podcast. So he did equip me through my husband. And I remember saying, like, the first episode, I shared something that happened to me as a nurse when someone left their body, and they told me what happened in the room when they were dead. And I think it was a 10-minute episode. I must have recorded it 30 times. I don't know. I came down and I told Lars, I'm like, he's like, well, I'm like, it's terrible, honey. It's terrible. And he's like, honey, it's going to be, it's your first one. Just do it. Like, he was just like, and so he was my cheerleader, and that sounds ugly, but his whole point was like, you just have to trust, you got to do it. You can't let this perfection thing stop you. So he was right by my side. I couldn't do any of this without him. But 7 years later, here we are. Almost 7 years. And I have put out this podcast, which I thought maybe my family, maybe my few people at church, and God has used it in ways that's all him. It's nothing to do with me. I was just pushing the button. It's usually not even anything that I say that people love. But when I found that I actually had a YouTube studio, which I didn't even know I had for a while, I'm telling you, this is when God calls you to do something, trust him and do it, because he has sent it out to countries around the world, places where evangelism is against the law. People have heard testimonies of miracles, and I had no idea what he was going to do. And then he led me to write, which again, that was like, I don't know. I've written in medical shorthand for 24 years, like with symbols, like, and you want me to write? It's been, I don't know. Sometimes I think I'll get to heaven and the angels will be like, girl, you were something, like trying to redirect you constantly and we'll laugh about it. I don't know, but, it's been amazing. And you know what, Carla, it has been scary too, because going back to that vision of having my stability and my security blanket of my own career and my own, I had to grieve the loss of a job that I loved. Now, granted, at the end, it was a very stressful job. There are times when I'm like, I'm kind of glad I don't have to do CPR and, rush to do all the crazy things that we had to do in the ER. And I mean, there were things I missed too, and the people I miss a lot, but I had to grieve that career. There were circumstances around my injury that were really hard. I had to learn how to forgive someone who wouldn't talk to me. So I learned a lot in that 3 years, but it was funny because I didn't even realize I had forgotten about that prayer in the ambulance. I had totally forgotten. And we were watching this video, and it was Glenn Beck on YouTube, and he was talking about something Billy Graham said. And it made me think about, the comment that he made. They were talking about the world and chaos, and Glenn Beck was asking Billy Graham, and this is right before he died. He's like, Billy Graham, we're losing all these faith giants. Like, who's going to be the next Billy Graham? Who's going to be the next George Washington, the next Abe Lincoln? Like, the world needs these people, right? And Billy Graham laughed and he said, it's not going to work that way this time. And he said, God is going to call up people, just regular people, to do specific things that they don't understand. they think that won't matter. And if everybody just listens, all these regular people just listen to the one thing that God is leading them to do, he said, you will see a mosaic light up across the earth, and everyone will know that only the God of Abraham, Isaac, only God could do this. And Lars turned to me and he's like, you're one of those people, honey. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he played it back and we listened, and he's like, you're one of those people. And Carla, every single one of us has the opportunity to be one of those people. And, maybe it's not a podcast. Maybe it's a real estate company. I saw firsthand what you guys are doing, and at your gala, people standing up and seeing the love that you're pouring into those people. Ministry is not always Billy Graham. It's usually not Billy Graham standing behind a pulpit. I mean, yay, I'm happy the world had Billy Graham. He's amazing. And we all want to leave a legacy, something like that we can glorify God with our lives on this earth while we're here, and love others and love one another. But, that really made me realize, like, oh my goodness. And in that moment, and I don't know if this was me thinking or God showing it to me, but I thought about that moment and that I heard that voice, this part of your life is over. And I didn't leave it. I didn't listen. And then in the ambulance, praying that prayer, God remembered my prayer. And it was like, oh my goodness, look at what he has done. And this podcast, it's funny, in the book, I wrote like that I had a vision of maybe my family and 10 people from a church. And a lot of my family doesn't even listen to my podcast, yeah. But like someone in Malaysia looks forward to it every episode, and she's like, this is giving me hope. And you don't know how God will use it, but it really helped me see, oh my goodness, this has been his plan for me all along. And it's taught me to trust him, not having that security blanket. And I have an amazing husband who's a provider, and we're so blessed, Is it a little scary to me? I'm not going to lie there. If something were to happen to him, or if something were to happen to us, God forbid, and I don't foresee that, but many people don't, and it would be nice to have some kind of fallback plan. But, God is teaching me to trust him day by day. And, I don't have that insecurity anymore, but it's been a process in getting there. So it's kind of my whole life story right there. But, my life is nothing. I never wanted to be on video. I never wanted to write a book. I never wanted to, but the blessings that have come through, I'm happy that I'm doing it. I am grateful. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but it looks nothing like what I thought. And, the way I have made connections with people around the world, I could sit here all day and tell you the way God has worked behind the scenes in this. ways that you wouldn't believe. I've been able to connect people. I have a miracle for just about every situation in my pocket. And God has worked through that. I've been able to connect people through some people that I know that I introduced are now doing ministries together. Like, and even my dad, sadly has been diagnosed with cancer. I've had people that have been on my podcast. They're like, Julie, they found out and they're like, let me call and pray with him. Like, let me help you. Let me send you this. I could cry talking about it, but that has blessed me so much. So, and the biggest thing of all, Carla, is I'm learning who God really is. He's been doing this through me as I'm learning about who he really is. And I'm still learning. And so, I want people to hear that, because sometimes I meet people, they're like, oh, I could never do what you do. I'm like, you have no idea. It's a miracle this is happening. So it's kind of my story in a nutshell.
I hear that all the time. Like, oh, I could never do that. That's not me. And this is so inspiring, Julie, because like you said, when you first heard the message, you were like, kind of just, ignoring it. Like, no, you had to listen, you had to trust, and then you had to actually do it. And that's really scary. Yeah. So kudos to you. Like that, you can't just say like, it's not me at all. You had to work through a lot of your personal stuff to get where you are today. So don't minimize that.
Thank you. And a lot of the credit is Lars, because he has really encouraged me and been like my coach, and he's paid for this microphone and this computer. And, I could not have done this without him. And even the writing, it was like, he sent me one time, I was so frustrated, and he's like, just go to a hotel room and lock the door and just write. Like he has been a big part of this. I can't imagine doing it without him. So, just going back to, speaking about him, I'm like really grateful for him in this process.
So if someone was going to start on a new venture, something scary, they have no idea how to start and they're anxious. I mean, it sounds like one piece of advice is to have a really good partner to support you. But what other advice would you give that person, coming from a place where you started something from absolutely nothing, having no idea even what a podcast was, to where you are today with, I think you have thousands of subscribers on YouTube. So, what advice would you give that person?
I know it can feel so scary. I remember wanting to quit so bad. It is so worth it. It is so worth it. But for me, the number one thing I did was pray. Of course, I felt like God was leading me through this whole thing. And, even in the beginning, Carla, I remember thinking, trying to power through it myself, like, okay, I'm going to do this and everything fell apart. And it wasn't until I really said, Lord, please lead me. Will you show me what you want? Show me the next step. Bring someone in my life to help me understand. And the more I prayed for me, again, this is a faith type, but I think it's important no matter what you do, but I felt like he brought me people. He showed me things. Also have grace for yourself. I had these times where I was like, well, what if I put a testimony on and they say something that was wrong? And, and I was so fearful of what people were going to think, or, and then now I have more of a fear of God. At the end of this, I'm going to be like, okay, Lord, I don't want him to be like, okay, this one, not so much, that was all you, I joke about that, but I do have a fear of God, and I want to please him first and foremost. But I think letting God lead you and praying for him to equip you, and you will be blown away by how he will do it. I remember when everything fell apart, I prayed and I said, God, I thought you wanted me to do this. Nothing is working, and I'm praying and I'm hearing nothing from God. I'm opening the Bible. Nothing is jumping out. And I just was so discouraged, and I had a hair appointment, and, I'm like, okay, God, I don't know what to do here, and I left for my hair appointment, and there's two of us in the whole salon and my hairdresser's rinsing the color out of my hair. And there's the lady next to me has also got her head in the sink. And, my hairdresser's like, well, tell me, what was this podcast? And again, so discouraged. I didn't want to talk about it. And I'm like, yeah, I was hoping to share miracles. And, the woman in the thing next to me, I couldn't even see her face, heard me talking, and she yells out from the sink, I have a miracle. I was like,
wow.
And she right there at the salon, and I would meet people in the craziest of ways. And again, I had the advantage of Lars, which I think I don't think about sometimes, but he really was so helpful in connecting me like, well, you can talk to this person about the artwork, or you can, and so I did have a big advantage with him. But I think God can bring people to you in all kinds of ways that you don't expect. So just pray and just do the next step and have grace, because you're going to make mistakes. Don't let the perfection paralysis get you. And honestly, right now, if you're starting a YouTube channel or a podcast, it's refreshing to see things that are real and authentic, because a lot of the things with media that are so glossy and you don't know what to believe anymore, people know authentic, when they see it. And it's refreshing. They don't really care about your backdrop and all the polished things. And I guess you could translate that into different types of things, but be yourself, pray, give yourself grace, because yes, you will make mistakes and nobody's perfect. And I finally started going, this is kind of my fact finder mind, but I actually started going to some of these conferences to learn. I think it was year 5 or 6. I'm like, maybe I should probably learn how to do some of this. And, it's never too late to learn. And so, taking a chance and just stepping out into the next step.
That's so good. I love the saying where it says, like, if your first work, when you put it out there, if you're not embarrassed by it, you waited too long. Like, it's gonna be bad at the beginning. That's normal. You have to work through all the kinks. Like you said, it took you maybe 5 years to even know, oh, maybe I should learn something, about this. So I think that's so refreshing to hear, Julie. So I want to talk a little bit about, where the podcast is going, and also about the new book that just came out. Like, what is God showing you that the path is going to be moving forward for you?
I have no idea. I guess I never expected to be here. But I just, I'll just be very candid with you, because Lars has his whole 5-year, 10-year, the whole projected plan. And I just look at him, I'm like, I never thought I'd be here. So I don't know. I think it's great to plan. It's great to do all those things. I'm not ridiculing it, because we do need to have a vision where we're going. And those steps do motivate us to do what we need to do today. Right. So I'm not making fun, honey, to Lars, but yeah, I think this, the day we're living in right now, Carla, there's so many people hurting. There's so much division. There's so much, we need hope, and doing this podcast, I feel like, and there's way more ways to do this. There's service. There's different things that you might be feeling led to do, like even making cupcakes one person made fortune cookies and put Bible verses in them, or just going and volunteering in some of these disaster areas. There's so many ways that we can get involved and step out. And I don't know what God is calling you to do. It may not look anything like a podcast, but as far as the podcast, it's been a way to bring hope to people, all kinds of people. There are all kinds of people that listen to my podcast. It's not, I don't want to be like a super religious type thing. And I feel like even when I created the artwork, I felt like it was just supposed to have miracles on it. It wasn't even my face that was going to be on it. It wasn't about me. But I think it's a way that it's brought hope to a lot of people in ways that I never expected. I'm seeing God move in it in a way. I don't know what the future holds. I never expected to write books. The first book I didn't even want to write. It was very personal. It was about learning who I am in Christ. And I share some of the pitfalls that I fall into, and I share stories about things where things went totally off the rails. Some of it's funny. It's very relatable. I talk about fear, isolation, neglect of self-care. There's 5 categories, comparison trap. Those are some of the things I talk about in that book, and ways to kind of keep from falling into those. And then the second book I have is a collection of miracles, and it shares my testimony as well, the snippets, of what it looked like. Cause I wanted people to see, yes, you can. If God can use me, I want you to see that He really does get the credit for all this. It wasn't anything miraculous about me. Yes, I was willing to step out. It kind of dragged me out in some times of it, but, yeah, I don't know exactly where it's going to go. Right now, it's exciting. I'm a little overwhelmed at all of the stuff coming in my inbox. It's because now the second book is out, that one is getting a lot more attention. I really didn't market the first book a lot. I didn't know how. But yeah, it's exciting. So I don't know. I'm going to a big conference. I've been invited to, it's a big media conference, and I'm going to meet a lot of people. I don't know what God has next for me, Carla, but I'm going to be obedient today with what he has for me. I'm going to love on my kids. My family is my first ministry. And supporting Lars is really important too. So I'll just take it day by day. If that answers your question.
It does. And we'll put links to both of the books. I did read both of them. The first one was so great for new moms because you go into motherhood not knowing what you don't know. And I feel like you broke it down so great and had like things that you could write out your own, go through your own issues. And it was great, Julie. So I would definitely get that if you're a new mom. And the second one is kind of in tandem with the podcast. If ever I'm having kind of like a day where I feel like I'm being bombarded by negativity, I'll just put your podcast on in the car, and it's so uplifting. It just reminds you like how good God is and how many good people are out in the world. And it's just uplifting. So like you said, you're just bringing hope to people. And I think that's so beautiful. Like your one purpose is to bring hope and support people and help people. Like what could go wrong with that?
Oh, thank you, Carla. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's, I'm excited to see where it goes. It's been an adventure I never expected. So I'm so glad I didn't chicken out. So I encourage you not to either.
So yeah, ladies, if you're listening, don't chicken out, and also don't get your neck adjusted. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there are things that they can do to help people, and there are tools where they don't have to twist. So just be wise. Yeah.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Awesome, Julie. Well, do you want to add anything else before we wrap it up?
I just love what you guys are doing. I hope I get to come to the gala. I don't know if I'm going to be able to this year, but love what you and Aaron have created, and the way you're loving on people is really beautiful. I just wanted to say that was something that really impressed me, and you're doing the work, and you're doing it from a good place, and it shows. So just keep doing what you're doing. You guys are growing. It's really exciting to see that.
Thank you. I'm constantly asking God to give me what he gave you. Is kind of like, do this, like be clear with me, please. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. So we're just continuing to try to pour into people. This year at the event, we are going to do a Bible study as well. So we're infusing different things, but at the end of the day, we want to do the same thing, is just bring hope to people, help people to grow in different ways, not just in real estate, but in general. So Thank you for acknowledging that. That's really nice of you to say. Yeah. And I hope that God does the same for me, and he gives me a path, and I can be as brave as you were and actually take it.
Yeah. He'll make it clear. Don't worry.
I hope so. I hope so. Well, thank you, Julie. As always, it's such a pleasure to talk with you. Your story is amazing, and I know it's going to inspire a lot of the ladies out there.